Have you ever considered the real value of loose parts? Well, do you know that most of the people on this podcast that I've interviewed have all said that loose parts is by far their favorite strategy to nurture curiosity? And this is no different in today's episode, where Janelle McArdle from My Teaching Cupboard shares her favorite strategies. And yes, it's loose parts once again, so there's got to be something in that. So sit back, get yourself a cuppa, and enjoy this episode where Janelle talks about her favorite strategies, and then I'll give you some tips on how you can implement loose parts as a strategy to nurture curiosity in your very own classroom. Hello and welcome to Blooming Curious, the podcast dedicated to reimagining early childhood education through the power of curiosity. We explore the strategies that inspire a lifelong love for learning in children. So if you're an educator or a curious parent looking for creative, meaningful ways to engage children and move beyond the talk and chalk traditional classroom approach, then this is the podcast for you. I love hearing what other educators' favorite strategies are for engaging children and nurturing their curiosity. And this should really be the first consideration for any teacher, is how do you get your children to be curious? Because once we hook children in to loving learning, the rest is easy. On this podcast, I have now interviewed so many amazing educators, and I've certainly noticed a theme. Obviously, they all value curiosity, but overwhelmingly, their favorite strategy for sparking curiosity is loose parts. Just think about my interview with Ash Sharp from Playmore, or Marcus Veerman from Noodlepod, or Dr. Claire Auden, or Veronica Green from Cultivating Confidence. I'll leave all these links in the show notes for you so that you can check out those episodes. But this is also the exact same response I received from Janelle McArdle. Janelle is an experienced early childhood educator in Queensland, Australia, and she shares her knowledge and expertise, including resources for teachers, on her website, My Teaching Cupboard, and she also has a Facebook group called My Teaching Cupboard. And I will share how you can access all her resources at the end of this episode, so stick around. But without further ado, let's hear what Janelle has to say.
My favourite strategy for nurturing curiosity in children is using loose parts. Loose parts are everyday objects like stones or shells or counters or even wooden blocks that children can use in so many different ways. What makes them so special is that they're completely open-ended. There's no right or wrong way to use them, and they're really cheap or sometimes even free. You probably already have some items you can use for loose parts in your classroom, like the collage trolley. That's a good place to source them. When you provide children with loose parts, you're essentially giving them the freedom to explore and create and problem solve in their own way and at their own developmental level. They might build a tower, they might sort them or create a pattern, or even pretend that a pine cone is a tiny little animal. The possibilities are endless with loose parts. They're fantastic for nurturing curiosity because they spark a child's imagination and encourage children to ask questions like, what can I do with this? Or what happens if I try this? That process of exploration and discovery is where true curiosity lies. As an educator, I love observing how children interact with loose parts because it gives me a glimpse into their thinking, their creativity, and where they are developmentally.
So thanks for sharing that, Janelle. Janelle is, of course, spot on. Loose parts are just such an indispensable resource. And as Janelle said, they don't have to be expensive. Almost any packaging, from empty cereal boxes to milk jug lids to chocolate wrappers, empty egg cartons, scraps of fabric, bits of yarn, and even those ribbons you get when you receive a posy of flowers. Anything can be a loose part. Loose parts are open-ended materials that children can manipulate, move, combine, and transform in multiple ways. They offer numerous developmental benefits. They promote creativity and imagination. When children encounter materials without a predetermined use, they invent their own purposes and their own scenarios, therefore strengthening their creative thinking. And we need more of that. It develops problem-solving skills when children have to figure out how to stack or balance or combine loose parts. It requires them to experiment and test theories and adapt their approaches. It also enhances their mathematical thinking. Children naturally explore mathematical concepts like sorting and classifying and patterning and spatial relationships when they work with diverse materials. And it also builds fine and gross motor skills. They manipulate objects of different sizes and weights and textures, and this all develops those crucial motor skills. It also encourages collaboration because children have to work together with loose parts, practicing their negotiation skills, sharing ideas, and building on each other's creations. It supports language development as children describe their creations and processes. They develop vocabulary and communication skills. But loose parts are not just for the early childhood classroom. In K-2 classrooms, you can start with a collection of natural materials, things like pine cones, stones, sticks, shells, all those kinds of stuff. Then you can add domestic items like fabric scraps and bottle tops and buttons and cardboard tubes. But here's the thing, rotate those materials regularly to maintain interest. Don't put everything out all at once. And also create a dedicated loose parts area with low shelves and labeled containers so that kids can access them easily. And document those children's creations with photographs before they get dismantled. But in the upper primary grades 3 to 6, you can introduce loose parts with more complex materials like mechanical parts and mechanical tools and recycled electronics. You can connect loose parts to the curriculum using natural materials, for example, in your science units. You can create engineering challenges using loose parts like building bridges with straws or pop sticks that need to hold a certain weight. You encourage students to document their own thinking process and their design decisions. And of course, create yourself a materials library where students can access these items for their projects. Now let me end with 7 tips to help you bring loose parts into your space. Number 1 is start small. Begin with just a few categories of materials rather than overwhelming children with everything in the kitchen sink. Number 2 is to source materials thoughtfully. Engage families in collecting items. You can visit thrift stores, you can get local businesses and donations. 3 is consider storage solutions. Use clear storage containers and label them with words and pictures. Connect the curriculum. Use loose parts to make abstract concepts tangible, creating number patterns or building story scenes. 5 is to ask questions. What would happen if? How else can you use this? What does this remind you of? Because loose parts dovetail so naturally with inquiry and questioning to take children's thinking further. And 6 is to value the process over the product. Focus on the thinking and the learning that's happening rather than creating a permanent artifact. It doesn't matter what the product looks like. It's the creation, the process, and thinking behind it that matters. And finally, document the learning. Take photographs, record children's explanations, and display your documentation to make your learning visible. So that's it for today. I hope you found some interest here, and to make your week ahead, really focus on bringing loose parts into your space. And then step back and observe, and you'll be pleasantly surprised as to how loose parts can make learning concrete for children of any age. Now, if you want to get in touch with Janelle, go to myteachingcover.com. I will put the link in the show notes for you, as well as where you can sign up for her Facebook group. If you found some value, and I'm sure you have, in this episode, can you do me a favor right now? Please click on the share button and share it with a friend or colleague so that more people can listen to Blooming Curious, because that's the only way this show can grow. Thanks for listening today. I'll see you again next week. And then remember, curiosity is not just a trait, it's a superpower. Take care. See you around.